Why those who are chosen, those with vision, deep spirit, and a greater calling, are the ones who struggle most with desire. You think they've conquered temptation? No, they are its prime targets. Because if you can throw off the path someone on a journey of awakening, you're not just breaking a person, you're sabotaging a mission. Desire doesn't come screaming. It comes through emptiness, through a hug that seems harmless, through a wound that hasn't yet been named. And then it breaks you in silence. This video is a wake-up call for those quietly fighting. If you see yourself in what I'm saying, leave a comment. Your story might save someone else. Not everyone has the patience to watch until the end, but those who do are always the ones who go further than the rest. If you're one of them, subscribe and like. We're on the same team. Here's a truth almost no one dares to say. People with depth, those with a strong spiritual connection, those with a sacred sense of calling, are often the ones most violently attacked by desire. Not because they lack discipline, not because they're corrupt or weak, but because their deep sensitivity and inner searching make them fertile ground for temptation to take root. Watch closely. The ones who believe the most, who strive to live with purpose and serve something greater than themselves, are often the ones most shaken by the quiet, seductive whispers in their heads. It's not always about lust. It's that voice saying, you deserve love. You just need someone who understands. You're tired. Just this once. These thoughts don't scream, they don't roar. They lull. Soft, sweet, and deadly. For those with a calling, desire doesn't show up clearly. It doesn't use force, it uses empathy. It's not an intruder, it's invited in. Invited by the loneliness you carry, by the feeling that no one really sees me, by wounds buried years ago that never got a name. So it enters, quietly. At first it's just a glance, a message, a little attention in a world where you felt ignored. It doesn't feel like sin, it feels like survival. Like a man dying of thirst in a desert reaching for water, without realizing it's a mirage. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens that harms you, it's how you react to it." The problem isn't the look, it's not the message, it's what's already empty, already exhausted, already yearning inside of you. When you live with purpose, you walk a narrow road, a road few others walk, and it is frankly lonely. There's no cheering crowd, no fans, no applause, just you and silence. And in that silence, desire speaks, and it speaks in the language you're most vulnerable to, attention. Some will say, but I wasn't looking for sex, I just wanted someone to listen. Exactly. At a higher level, desire no longer takes the form of flesh. It puts on emotional clothing. It sits down, pours you tea, looks you in the eyes and says, I understand you. It doesn't offer pleasure. It offers to fill the void. But what it doesn't tell you is, it only fills it for a few minutes, and then it leaves a hole, bigger, darker, deeper than before. Marcus Aurelius called desire a biological reflex, not something to worship and not something to fear. Simple words. But to see desire for what it truly is, you must stand in clarity. You must be still enough to say, this is a feeling. It is not me. I am not required to obey it. But before you can reach that clarity, you have to admit something first. You're under attack. And most people won't say that. They think if I admit I'm struggling with desire, what will people think? I'm supposed to be someone of faith, of discipline, of integrity. How can I feel such dirty things? And that exact thinking is what pulls people under. They stay silent. They pretend they're fine. They force themselves to play the role of the mature one, the chosen one, the strong one. And while they keep performing, desire is eating them alive from the inside. Stoicism doesn't teach you to deny emotion. It teaches you to face emotion with clear, reasoned mind. Desire is not the enemy, it's a test. And the greater your mission, the harder the test. That's not punishment, that's proof you're on the right path. Because if you weren't a threat, no one would bother to stop you. So if you're fighting desire, don't be ashamed. Call it what it is. See it for the opponent it is. Don't lie to yourself and say, everything's fine. Awareness begins with truth. And the truth is, desire doesn't target the corrupt. It targets the valuable to stop them from becoming who they truly are. No one warns you that answering the call of purpose, of ideals, of spiritual depth, is also stepping into a path of isolation. Not because people abandon you, but because you separate yourself. You no longer fit in with the loud parties. You no longer belong in shallow circles. You start to go deep, but the deeper you go, the fewer people walk with you. And then come the nights when you have no one to call. Moments when you wish you could just be normal like everyone else. Have dinner with someone, hear a simple good night, have someone say, "I believe in you." But no. All you have is silence, walls, unanswered messages, and a mind that won't stop spinning. And it's in that void that desire begins to find its way in. It doesn't show up as porn. It comes through a message from someone you once knew, a casual touch from a stranger, a glance in a crowd that makes you feel for a second like someone finally sees you. In that moment, it doesn't feel like lust, it feels like rescue. Like someone cares, like someone noticed. And you whisper to yourself, "It's fine. I'm just trying to fill a little loneliness." But that's how desire works. It doesn't force entry, it slips through the cracks in your soul. And the biggest crack is always isolation. Epictetus said, "No one can hurt you without your consent." But when you're alone, it's easy to forget that. You start to soften. You start letting in things you've already outgrown. Only now they come back in a subtler, softer form. You don't fall because you're weak. You fall because no one's there to remind you. You don't fall from sin. You fall from the absence of someone pulling you back when you start to slip. I've seen strong men collapse, not because they lacked strength, but because no one really understood them for too long. No one called them at 5 a.m. to meditate. No one asked, "Did you keep your discipline this week?" No one dared say, "I think you're avoiding yourself." And because no one sees, they start doing what only the lonely understand, texting old flames just to hear a familiar voice. Scrolling for hours not for joy, but to stuff something into that invisible hollow inside. Watching things they once gave up, not out of craving, but because they simply don't know what to do with the emptiness anymore. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Your mind becomes what you consistently feed it." In isolation, if you don't deliberately feed it truth, it will latch on to whatever's easiest. And the easiest thing is always desire. Why? Because it's fast. It's easy to trigger. It promises instant reward. And when you're alone, you crave something now. No one in isolation wants to wait. You want to feel better this second. And that's when you're most likely to sell yourself cheap. Stoicism doesn't teach you to kill desire. It teaches you to understand what's making you vulnerable enough to be blind to the difference between truth and trap. And in most cases, the real enemy isn't desire, it's unmanaged isolation. Seneca warned, "Choose someone you can truly confide in, and don't let your mind become the shelter for everything you know is wrong." In the modern world, isolation isn't just a lack of people nearby, it's a lack of anyone willing to be honest with you. No mentor, no tribe, no mirror. So the first step isn't to fight desire, it's to break the isolation. Reconnect, not with a lover, but with a guide. Not for comfort, but for correction. Someone to tell you, that's not love, that's dopamine born from your emptiness. The greater your calling, the more precise your community must be. The deeper you go, the more you need people to anchor you when the current gets strong. Not everyone will get you, but some are built to walk beside you in the fight to keep your soul steady in the storm. Desire doesn't grow roots and strength, it grows in loneliness. And if you stay there too long, you forget what's real and what's fake. You start falling in love with the very things pulling you down. You start searching in the dark for things only the light can give. Don't let yourself get cut off. Don't fight alone. And if today you find yourself in that place of isolation, say something. Message someone. Drop a comment. Maybe a stranger will read it and say, "I'm there too, and we won't stay here forever." This isn't just a video. This is the reminder you needed today. Hit subscribe and like if you want someone in your corner, pushing you to live by your real values. There's an unwritten law that anyone who's ever walked the path of awakening understands. The bigger your mission, the more violent the tests. Not because you're weak, not because the universe is unfair, but because true evolution only happens when you're pushed to your absolute limits. The higher you climb, the harder the darkness tries to drag you down. Not through obvious attacks, but through exhaustion, through weariness, and most of all, through desire, the easiest trigger in the human animal and the most corrosive threat to deep spiritual alignment. Spiritually called men are not men without desire. They're men who feel everything more deeply than most. And for that very reason, they are prime targets for the subtle ambushes of the ego. The more you crave to do what's right, the more you become a magnet for what's almost right. You're not tempted by what's obviously wrong. You're tempted by what feels close enough. A healing relationship, a soulful embrace, a person who makes you believe this is the kind of love I deserve. But underneath that softness, there's a trap. And if you're tired, if you're disconnected from your inner summit, you'll fall. Epictetus said, if you wish to grow, expect pain and don't complain. But there's a unique kind of pain that cuts deepest, knowing you're drifting off the right path and not having the clarity to stop. The more people look up to you, the more who believe you're their light, the more pressure you'll feel to hold the image. And it's that exact pressure that keeps you from saying the words you need to say. I'm being tempted. I'm struggling. I'm right on the edge. So you stay silent. You smile. You teach. You inspire. But inside, you're cracking. That's how the ones with the greatest callings fall, not because they're weak, but because they're completely alone at the top. No one dares speak truth to them. No one close enough to notice their eyes have changed. They're not abandoned by people. They're abandoned by the pedestal they've climbed. Think climbing higher means fewer temptations? No. The higher you go, the stronger the wind. The brighter the light, the clearer the shadow. You're not just fighting your own desire. You're fighting expectations, inauthentic praise, applause, and peak-level loneliness. Marcus Aurelius, a king and a philosopher, wrote, "Remember, you could die today. Act accordingly, as if every action were your last." It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. You don't have time to play the keep-up appearances game. You have to live real. Now. Because if you don't, you'll get pulled into the spiral of desire that always begins with just this once. I used to think, I'm strong now. I've moved past temptation. And that's exactly when I got knocked down, not by force, but by gentleness. A well-timed message. Someone who said exactly what I needed to hear. A look that made me feel seen. And I got lost. Because I forgot, the testing never ends. It only changes form. Seneca once warned, nothing weakens a man faster than believing he's already strong. That's why Stoics never stop training, not because they're afraid, but because they understand the ego is always watching. Desire never dies. It just waits for you to drop your guard. So if today you feel like you're holding it all together, but barely, if you're at the top but feel empty, if you're living right but still craving a hug, a word of recognition, a feeling of being understood, don't judge yourself. But don't take it lightly either. Step back. What you're really longing for is to reconnect with the one you've been drifting from. Not a person, not a moment. You don't need more. You need deeper. You don't need someone new. You need to remember who you are, where you came from, and why you chose this path. The war is more brutal, not because you're off track, but because you're getting closer to what's true. And the closer you get, the harder darkness will fight to throw you off course. Stay sharp, stay humble, reconnect. Don't fight alone. And if you're losing balance today, speak it. Don't hold it in. Every fall begins with silence. People often think desire comes for you because you're weak. But that's not the truth. Desire rarely attacks head-on. It slips through the cracks that haven't healed. And everyone has cracks. The question isn't, are you wounded? It's, how are you living with the wounds you carry? And in most cases, we don't live with them. We avoid them. Maybe you were abandoned, betrayed, yelled at by a parent so many times you started believing, I'm not enough. Maybe you loved and weren't loved back, were compared, dismissed. All those wounds, if left unnamed, unacknowledged, become the breeding ground for desire to grow. When it shows up, you don't feel lustful. You feel like you just want to be close to someone. You want a hug. You want someone to look at you in a way no one else does. But the truth is, you're reaching for anesthesia, something to numb the emptiness, to silence the old story, I'm not lovable. The one that's been in your blood since you were 8. Desire doesn't come from the present, it's fueled by the past. And when your present becomes weak, it rises like an old addiction you thought you'd beaten. Epictetus once said, "If you want to be free, learn to decline the sweetest offers. But to decline it, you have to see it for what it is." And that's the problem. Most people don't recognize desire. They see a kind stranger, a chance to reconnect with themselves, an adventure worth exploring. And they tell themselves, "I'm not doing anything wrong." But the truth is, you're using someone as pain relief for an ache you've never dealt with. Seneca called this false comfort, like drinking to forget. It gives you short-term relief, only to drag you into long-term shame, regret, and repetition. I once saw a 45-year-old man, successful, respected, happily married, fall apart because a young woman said to him, "You seem so deep." He didn't cheat out of lust. He betrayed because no one had ever told him he was deep, and that thirst had existed since the day his father called him worthless. See it? Desire doesn't begin in the now. It only gets triggered by wounds from a past that's never been healed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You can't master yourself if you're controlled by anything other than reason." Emotional wounds, if not named and brought into the light of reason, sit there as invisible forces, quietly hijacking every decision you make. You think you're choosing love, but you're really trying to soothe the abandoned child in you. So how do you break free? Not by guilt, not by fighting temptation, but by going inward and asking, what pain am I using desire to cover up? The answer might shock you. Maybe you don't need sex, you need an apology from a father who's no longer alive. Maybe you don't need another romance, you need to hold your inner child and finally say, "I see you, and I won't abandon you again." Stoicism doesn't teach us to run from emotion. It teaches us to master it, through brutal honesty. No denial, no detours. You look your pain in the eye, you name it, and only then can you act with true freedom. Freedom doesn't come from running from temptation. Freedom comes when nothing can manipulate you, not even the wounds you've tried so hard to ignore. The most important question you can ask is, what am I really looking for in this person? Is what I'm chasing truly about them, or is it about an old pain I never healed? If you're brave enough to ask that, the answer will be clear. I'm craving something I've never truly received from anyone. And you'll realize, no one can give you that but you. Once you learn to hold yourself, that's when desire loses its grip. Because you're no longer using it to medicate pain. You're no longer searching in others for something only you can give yourself. Validation, love, presence. You don't need another relationship to heal. You need to confront yourself. And the wounds you thought you'd buried. Write yourself a letter. Face your father, your mother, your past, even if they're gone, and say what you never had the courage to say. True courage isn't about resisting temptation. It's about diving deep into the unhealed pain and freeing yourself from the need to fill it with anything external. And once you do that, you'll understand, desire was never the enemy. It was a signal, a fire alarm saying, there's a child inside you that still needs to be heard. And when you finally listen, you won't need to run anymore. You won't need to hide. You'll stand still. Breathe deeply. Watch desire pass by like a cloud. And in that silence, you'll smile. I'm not controlled anymore. It might sound like a paradox, but I'll say it straight. Those with the strongest calling, the deepest spiritual clarity, the most disciplined lives are often the ones who fall hardest at the simplest point, the flesh. You could spend your whole life studying, meditating, praying, teaching, but one moment of distraction, 1 second of weakness, is enough to trade it all for a single touch, a glance, a conversation that seemed harmless but hit the most fragile part of you. Why? Because we are not divine. We have skin, flesh, hormones, emotion, instinct. The higher you climb, the more you must carry that flesh with you, and if it isn't rigorously and constantly trained, it becomes the hook that drags you straight back down. Marcus Aurelius, a resolute and awake emperor, wrote in Meditations, "Desire is nothing but a contraction of the muscles and a few drops of bodily fluid. Nothing more." He faced desire for what it biologically is, so he wouldn't glorify it or fear it. But ask yourself, how many times have you turned desire into something sacred? How many times have you let it define your identity, only to then rip yourself apart in shame? I once thought, I'm strong now, nothing can tempt me. Then one night, my body was tired, my mind drifted. A message came in at midnight, not even sexual, but it stirred something, and I slipped. Just once, right? That's what you tell yourself. That phrase, just once, is where all self-mastery begins to crumble. You've been disciplined for months, you've meditated, done the right things, and suddenly you feel like you deserve to let go. So you try. But the cost is never small, because the issue isn't just the act, it's what happens afterward. You stop looking yourself in the mirror. You can't pray with ease anymore. You start avoiding yourself. And once you begin avoiding yourself, desire doesn't even have to try. It just waits. Epictetus gave this sharp warning. Freedom is not doing what you want. It's not being forced to do what you don't want. Once desire captures a part of you, it stops being a choice. It becomes a habit. You tried it just to see. And now, every time you're exhausted, your brain returns to that place by default. Your body responds before your mind catches up. And you lose, again and again. Not because you're weak, but because you stopped training the flesh the way you trained the mind. Stoicism doesn't just preach reason, it preaches temperance. Humility before yourself. The moment you think I've got this is the moment you let your guard down. The moment you believe I'm past that is the moment your instincts blindside you. You can't kill desire, but you can teach it who's in charge. And to do that, you need three things: discipline, presence, and brutal honesty. Discipline is committing to principles when your emotions scream otherwise. It's shutting the laptop even if it's just 5 more minutes. Turning away when that look tries to anchor you. Turning off the lights, lying still, breathing deep, and repeating a simple mantra, I am the master. Presence is knowing when your body is crying out for touch, affection, closeness. It's recognizing when you're chasing stimulation because you're tired, not because you want. And being clear-headed enough to pause so instinct doesn't drive your next decision. Honesty is the courage to admit, I'm weak here, I need help. That's real strength. The Stoic man isn't the one who always wins. He's the one brave enough to admit defeat in time, not to lose forever. You could stand in front of thousands preaching about virtue, self-control, and still collapse in a room where no one's watching. That's why you need real inner strength. Not to perform, but to survive. This flesh is the vehicle that carries your soul to its destination. If you can't master it, forget about transcendence or enlightenment. No freedom exists if you're still pulled backward by a few seconds of dopamine and serotonin. Remember, you're not broken. You're just not clear. And clarity doesn't come from theory. It comes from daily practice, from sitting down, breathing, journaling, awakening, training. Yes, the flesh is the weak point. But if you can accept that, face it, train it, respect it like a wild horse that needs to be tamed, then it will carry you to where you're meant to go. You don't need to wait for everything to fall apart to understand. But if you keep living with just one more time won't hurt, prepare for 3 things. First, you'll lose self-respect. No one has to judge you. You'll be the first to turn on yourself. You'll avoid your reflection. You'll start hiding. Then, you'll start lying to yourself. Second, you'll lose spiritual connection. No one can access their inner summit while being dragged down by untrained instinct. Every time you let go, you step further from the light. Every time you say just this once, you dig deeper into the dark. Third, you'll become manipulable. By others, by circumstance, by your own emotions. When you can't control desire, you're no longer the driver, you're the vehicle. And that vehicle will not take you where you need to go. It'll drive you in circles of guilt, avoidance, and self-destruction. In the end, controlling desire isn't about being more moral. It's about living as a truly free man. You weren't born to be a slave to emotion. You were born to master yourself. And if you've fallen before, share it in the comments. No one's judging you. Maybe your story is the rope someone else needs to climb out from the edge. Thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.